Welcome to Beyond the Breakwater, where just beyond the crashing waves of fear, discomfort, and doubt lies the greatest potential for life transformation. We want to guide you into the open waters where the calculated risk you take becomes the turning point for you or your organization to thrive. So draw up your anchors and prepare for departure in this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater. All right, everyone, we're back with another episode of Beyond the Breakwater. If you've been here with us for a while, we're so glad you're here. If you're listening for the very first time, welcome. I'm Lyndsay, and this is Ed. How are you, Ed?
Lyndsay, I'm doing great. Sometimes these are they're fun, but they're a little bit challenging. And I think we're going to find today's a little bit challenging for us.
Oh, yeah. This one's going to be tough. We're going to do a question and answer series here. We've just been getting a lot of questions from listeners. We've had questions ourselves, questions from people in our congregation and leaders. And we've been at this now for a couple months. I think we're 27 episodes in. So with that, there's come a lot of having to challenge the model a little bit and get us to take a little bit of a deeper dive. And we are still learning. And I'm sure in 10 episodes from now, we're going to be we're at a place again where we're challenged.
Yeah, you almost want to go back and say, can we erase that little part of it? Because we've grown, we've learned, we keep being challenged, we keep trying to get more clarity for this.
Yeah.
Because when you use a model like this, there's just sometimes that it's just wow, that seems to be breaking down. But I don't think it is breaking down. I think the concept is right. But sometimes when we get really into the weeds, that's when it gets a little bit harder.
Right. Yeah. So, and I mean, it's great. It's all great things when we're having to learn and examine things, because I think it does just provide some more clarity when we can dig our heels in a little bit and be like, okay, what is this really and how can we apply it?
Yeah. So I think I would encourage everybody who's listening today, just enjoy the conversation, because this is really we're wrestling with this. And I think if we're wrestling with this, others are wrestling with this too. And so maybe together we're going to bring more clarity for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump into the first question of, we're talking about the Marina and the boat. Maybe, do you want to just give an explanation generally what Beyond the Breakwater means?
So we've been using this model Beyond the Breakwater because there's a harbor area, then there's a transitional piece, which is what the breakwaters are, like two piers, that are going out 100 feet into the water. And then you get beyond the breakwater, which is where the open waters, the open seas, that's where people are. And typically churches are in the harbor, they're huddling, and this is where they are. And the people who don't know Christ are beyond the breakwater. And the church has, over the years, turned more inward slowly. I mean, I think in America, if we go back in history, it seems like the 1950s were really the heyday of the church, just permeating in every community, and churches were starting up and camps were starting up. And it seemed like whatever the church did, it was really flourishing. But over these last 70 years, the church has slowly kind of pulled in, and they started out what we would call huddle. And as we use this model of Beyond the Breakwater, churches used to be in the water. They used to be going beyond the breakwater. That was kind of normal for them. Church growth was prevalent in almost every church. It was just happening. But now it seems like as churches started to huddle, we've expressed this before, I'm not even sure churches are in the harbor. I think churches have left the water altogether. I don't think they're even wanting to be around the water, because the water is a reminder that they should be doing something. They should be going after lost people. And so I think more and more what we're watching in our community is that churches completely isolate themselves. They huddle with a sign out, "You're welcome here," but they have no intention of doing anything in terms of outreach. They have no intention of trying to serve somebody in the community or try to help anybody in the community. And now what we're watching is that we're watching churches closing, and it's really heartbreaking. In the last just few months, I've watched churches close. And last week I had a meeting, and it was just with a nonprofit organization, and I went to this former church. And we were meeting in the worship center, in the sanctuary. And it was a little bit of a weird feeling like, wow, this used to be a place where people were seeking Christ. And now it has nothing to do with Christ. And it's just this non-profit organization, has nothing to do with Jesus. I think churches, that would be a good example of a church that lost its mission, forgot about its mission. They're not even around the harbor anymore. And they've just kind of like gone inland really far. Mm-hmm. And so this is a call to the church. It's a call to the church to go back into the water, mm-hmm. to go back down, maybe first to get down to the harbor. That's a great start.
Right.
So that they can maybe think about going beyond the breakwater, which is where people who don't know Christ are.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that brief explanation.
Yeah.
Kidding. No, it was good.
Brief.
It was good. So we're kind of talking about like boats going out beyond the breakwater. That is the challenge for churches, to go and serve their communities and not to just stay in that inward huddle. We've talked in previous episodes about the Marina being a place that, okay, your boat's going to go out there and there are drowning people out there, and you'll bring people on board who are ready to be saved and put a life jacket on them. You bring them out, you bring them back to the Marina, and it's like, okay, they've been out there drowning for who knows how long. They're cold, they're hungry, they're going to need counseling, they've had trauma. And the Marina is a place where the church can also come back, that boat can come back and be refilled. It's a place both where those who are drowning can come and be restored, they can be fed, but also for the boat itself. The boat's going to be taken care of. You know, we're going to see other boats there and we're going to say, what did you see out there? Like, let's celebrate what's happened the last 6 days of the week, and let's celebrate and be refueled together. Yeah. So in that scenario, it's like, okay, is the Marina the church, or is the boat the church, or is the boat an outreach ministry of the church?
Yeah, those are hard questions, actually. I think we're going to try to bring more clarity because I think we're learning more. Mm-hmm. I think ideally, if you think about bricks and mortar, that most churches are a place, even though it's the people usually gather around in a place. And whether it's a rented space, like at a school, or whether it's they own their own church, I'd like to see the church more like a Marina who has taken residents up near water. Mm-hmm. Where they've taken residents up knowing that there are people in their community that really need them. And so I think it's almost philosophical that it's just like, no, we're not going to huddle far away and isolate ourselves, which is what we just talked about. We're going to actually go down by the water because that's where actually believers and non-believers are gathering. Let's set up shop like a marina. Could be a small marina, could be a big marina. But then every church actually has a boat, at least a boat. Mm-hmm. And what that would mean is that people from the church are saying, why don't we do a food ministry into our community? And so you get people that are gathering on that boat. Maybe it's the whole church gathers on the boat. Maybe it's just a few that gather on the boat. But some people are gathering on the boat, and it probably has your church name on the boat, you know, like, oh, we're from this church, you know, we're the first whatever in our community. And so that boat, here's the challenge, though, Lyndsay, I think what we've watched. Churches know, they know the mission because Jesus said, go make disciples. Mm-hmm. So they know the mission inherently is to go beyond the breakwater because that's where lost people are. Mm-hmm. That's where people are who don't know Christ. But for whatever reason, they get on a boat and it's all ready. They know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And they get in the boat, and we watched this when we were, in the breakwater. Boats will kind of just, I don't know, they'll just like motor around in the harbor. Like, isn't this wonderful? This is what churches do. They get in their boat and they go around, and isn't this amazing? And we're playing church, and we're acting like the church, and we're acting like we have a mission as a church, except they're not going where people are who don't know Christ. Mm-hmm. And they're sticking close to where church people are. And then they get out and they say, oh, that was really fun. We got in the boat. We did this. Wasn't this great? We did all this amazing stuff. But when they go back into their building, what are they training for? See, a church should be in everything, connecting people to Christ so that other people can hear about Christ. They should be in small groups in community. They should be learning discipleship on how to go beyond the breakwater. Mm-hmm. Worship should be a chance where everybody who all week long is beyond the breakwater individually, and maybe in groups or different ministries, and then they come back on Sunday and they go into that marina and they have this amazing worship experience with God, and they're celebrating. And you hope that somebody or many came in with their family boat who was beyond the breakwater and invited a family to come with them, and they came in and they may not know Christ, and they come and say, "You're welcome in our marina, come into the marina." And now they're hearing about Christ, they're learning about Christ. And remember, we talked about what salvation is, and the model is a life jacket. And they walk in and you kind of smile because most of the church has life jackets on, and here's a couple of people in there. And so you kind of know they don't have a life jacket on. And they're looking around going, "I don't have what y'all have, because you guys have something I don't have that I kind of want. What is this life jacket? Who is Jesus? And I want Jesus." And then oftentimes they're the ones who are the most excited to go back beyond the breakwater because that's where their family and friends are. So I think in our model, churches are like a marina, and they can almost be established as a marina, but you want a church to have a boat, a ministry, a way that they can take people within the church and take it to where people who don't know Christ are.
Yeah. So is it fair to say like the marina and the boat is all the church?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because that's kind of where my mind was going as you're explaining this, is I think as people, we look for patterns and we like to separate things into categories.
Yes.
And so there's question of, okay, is the marina the church? Is a boat a church? Is a boat a ministry of the church? But can't a ministry of the church be the church as well?
Yeah.
Like a holistic idea of like the church mobilized.
Yes, exactly right. If you remember when we went in the river, and remember some of those boats, they weren't even in the water. They were like suspended up.
Right.
And we had to laugh at those because like they had all the makings of the boat. I mean, they were pristine condition. They had rods, fishing rods, and they had the motor and they had everything. It's like they were all ready to go. And we said, that's kind of how some churches are. See, that would be a church that, let's just say they're gathering in the marina and they're like, "We got the prettiest boat out there." What do you do with it? "Oh, nothing. We just look at it."
Yeah. Well, I think churches even like they do desire to go out and to serve, but it's just like, okay, how does that even happen? Like I knew of a church that had a missions team or like a local serving team that met for 3 years. And they talked and talked and talked about what they could possibly do. Their hearts were to serve.
Right.
Nothing ever came of it, and the group disbanded. And like that ministry is it's no more. But it's like I think that's what like churches are feeling, that grind of like they are prepared. Their churches are seemingly prepared. Their boats are seemingly prepared to get in the water and go out on mission. But there's I don't know what is that thing that's keeping them from doing something.
Well, how many churches have outreach committees, evangelism committees? And that was always just so funny. That was always like the dreaded one. Everybody was like, they'll serve on anyone, but they don't want to be on the outreach committee. They just don't want to do that. See, the outreach committee is almost like, we've got this boat. We don't know what to do with it. And we don't know where to go, and we don't know what to do. And I think it should be the most fun part of the whole church because it's just like, whoa, take the boat. Let's go. Let's go to where people are. Let's go find out in our community where people are. And what it really takes is just somebody who says, let's go ask some questions. Let's go into the community and go ask. And you start talking to different people. I mean, last week I had a great privilege. I sat down with the mayor and I sat down with the comptroller for the whole county. And then just yesterday I was meeting with Midland Business Alliance president and a business owner. See, I'm doing it a lot. I'm going out into the community and I'm just asking questions. It's like I feel like I get in my little boat and I run out into the community and I'm like, "Hey, would you meet with me?" And you get to ask all these questions.
Did you think you were going to do that when you started going to school to be a pastor?
Oh, heavens no, no. But I remember we were told, now you're going to want to go meet with some of the leaders in the community. But it's really different now. See, now, because we're established in the community, serving the community, we're coming at a different place now because now we're coming as a church that is really serving a community well in all these different ways. And now they're like, okay, you got a seat at the table. In fact, that was the most interesting thing when I left that meeting yesterday. I was driving in a car and I said, Lord, I feel like I have a seat at the table. And it's not often that a church gets a seat at the table. And I felt like I had a seat at the table. Like we had something, as a church, you have something worthwhile that the president of a Midland Business Alliance that oversees hundreds and hundreds of businesses says, I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, you had said something this past Sunday in your message that is kind of just like resonating with me now in this. It was more targeted to the individual of like, I think we underestimate the power of Jesus through the individual. And I think through the church too, where it's like you talk about, okay, schools ban like faith from being an interaction point in schools. Okay, but guess what? If there's a believer that's a student, that's a teacher, that's a staff worker, that's in that school, like Jesus is there.
Yeah.
Like politics, like faith is banned from politics. Okay, but you have a politician who's a believer, like Jesus is there.
Yes.
And so I think the church has that same potential and has that, like, you have a seat at the table, like this place that is just dedicated solely for, I don't even know what it is, but it's like you have a seat at the table and Jesus has a seat at the table there as well.
That's right. And I think this is where churches have to take their boats. And it doesn't matter if it's a pastor or if it's people in, it really should be everybody. I mean, let me just paint the best model for the church. It would be a marina, a building on the waterfront. I mean, just real close to the waterfront. And then has 100 docks. And you have families that are coming in their boat, and then when they leave worship, they go beyond the breakwater. And as a family, they're following Christ into the community. And then you have a ministry that says, hey, Monday morning, this is when our food ministry starts. And a group of people get on that boat, and then they take off. And you have a business owner who says, you know what, I'm getting in my little boat, my little dinghy boat, and I'm going into the workplace, and Jesus is going into the workplace with me. So what we almost should see as a model is that on Sunday morning, you know, like, where are all these boats coming from? And they're all coming from beyond the breakwater, and they're all gathering, you know, on all of these docks. Everybody gets out of the docks, everybody goes in, celebrates worship, gets trained up, gets discipled, learns some new things, grows in a relationship with Christ. You know, 11 o'clock comes or whenever worship ends and everybody gets in their boats and they're not leaving, they're going beyond the breakwater, they're not going inland.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about the Marina piece of, like, in that image, you were like, okay, everybody's coming back in to celebrate. They're coming in to get trained to worship. How do churches balance the in-reach, those things that are the education, the training, the discipling, getting people prepared to go out? How do you balance that as well as just like the role of the church and believers to glorify God and worship?
Yeah.
How do you balance that with the outreach of going out?
Yeah, well, I think this is the difference. I think the difference is when you have a church that nobody new has come to the church in a while, you have a little bit of a different discipleship. I don't know if I would call it discipleship. I think you're studying the Bible to get more knowledge and more understanding and more growth, and really you're huddling. When a church begins to invite somebody to come into the church, your message should be for the one who doesn't yet know Christ. This is why I encourage pastors, go to Burger King, go to McDonald's, you know, go to Starbucks, write your messages somewhere else so that you're always thinking in mind of the person who walks into church who doesn't yet know Christ. So your message, worship on Sunday, is not just for the believers. You're like, there's somebody here who may not yet know Christ. And so you preach differently. When they show up at Bible class, don't make the assumption that everybody's a believer. Hope and expect somebody not to be a believer, because then you're disciple making in that Bible class. So when we say in-reach should be you're building up the body of Christ with the intention of sending them beyond the breakwater.
Yeah, I think that could still be called discipling.
It's discipling.
Yeah, just for the purpose of mission. I think churches are now discipling just to learn and to educate, but like it lacks the mission.
Yes, but Jesus
Is that
said,
too
go
bold?
make disciples.
Yeah.
And I think he meant new disciples.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he meant just gather together. And I know that I don't want to offend anybody, but I think all you're doing is fattening up the church.
Mm.
I mean, if your disciple making is just for your own spiritual growth and knowledge, with no outreach, with no purpose to help somebody else know Christ, then I think all you're doing is you're getting a very spiritually fat church, but doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you said, like the church, they talked about it for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I bet they felt like they were really doing something significant because they were talking about it, but they actually weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
Our discipleship should be training.
Mm-hmm.
It should be training for going on Beyond the Breakwater. It should be celebrating what's happened beyond the breakwater and then getting everybody ready to go back out in their boats.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, not only do they have boats, but the church should have a boat, 2, 3, 4. That's how we see our community ministries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Monday morning, 8 o'clock, the garage opens. And it is like a boat that's a garage, and it heads out beyond the breakwater. And it comes back Friday night, and they're all exhausted, and then they celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there's still, I don't know, I'm hearing the practical piece of how do you balance those two. Is the balance to like continue doing those things as a church, like educating, discipling, having Bible classes, gathering for worship, gathering for prayer, like all of those things, continue doing those things for the purpose of glorifying God and for mission.
Yes, because we said this before. What do you call a church with no mission? And nobody likes the answer.
I know.
It's a club.
Yeah.
That's not what a church is designed to do. If a church has a mission, and that's what a church is, the mission of Christ to go make disciples, then everything the church is doing, when we say in-reach, the in-reach should be, wow, how do I develop the believers to be missional? That should be the purpose of every message. That should be the purpose of every Bible class. Like, I'm not telling you this so that you can get spiritually fat. I'm telling you this so that you maybe know a little bit more about Christ, so that when you're asked by that person, give a hope, and you're like, man, I can talk about the hope I have in Christ because I've been in the scriptures and I'm learning the scriptures. So it's missional. It all has to be missional.
Yeah. So is it possible for a boat to go out and like what happens if it capsizes?
Yeah. Okay. I think sometimes churches are going to go out and it's not going to go as planned. But if we go back to our model, so that would be like, let's just say the church starts a food ministry and it fails miserably. Did any of the believers die spiritually? No. See, in our model, if you're a believer in Christ, you have a life jacket on. You can't die. So go out.
Yeah.
Start a food ministry if you want to start a food ministry. And you may be out there and your boat's a food ministry and you're like, this is amazing. And it capsizes and it dies a bad death. But all the believers have life jackets on.
Yeah.
They're not going to die. And you're like, well, that didn't go so well.
We died trying.
Let's try something else.
Yeah. So, okay, jumping back into your picture of like, okay, the marina on the waterfront, and there are 100 docks.
Yes.
We've talked about the marina and the boats being the church together.
Yes.
They're not separate. Like a ministry of the church is still the church.
Correct.
So in that model where the marina and then the 100 docks, could that be like the Big C church? Like, because my next line of thinking here is like, okay, what happens when, like, is it okay to be a marina and have like 70% of your boats go out and then the other 30% stay at the docks?
Yes, you're going to have some people that, boy, they're just not going to be able to go out beyond the breakwater. People.
Individuals.
But those are the individuals that, how can they support the mission? Can they pray? Can they give? Can they encourage? Support? Can they welcome the new person who comes in? Because remember, when the boats go out, the hope the hope always is that in one of these 100 docks, somebody's bringing somebody back and they're there for the first time. And so some people are like, I'm scared to go talk to somebody about Jesus, but man, you bring them in and I'll love the daylights out of them. And that's a great thing.
Yeah.
So that's okay. So let's go back to your big C, little C church, because I think the little C church can have 100 docks. Some of them are the church's ministry, the little C church's ministry with their name on it. I mean, a lot of churches will do that. Like, oh, this is, First Baptist, food pantry, that's their boat that they're taking out and to the community. That's okay. But remember, the church is the people, not a building and not a boat. So it's the people that are occupying the marina, and it's the people that are occupying the boats. That's the church. The boats are just the tools that are being used.
Right. Yeah. I think of I was listening again to another podcast or sermon, and it was talking about what is the church, and the church being a holy assembly of people.
Yes.
And that is the thing that stands out from you can have an assembly of people at a sports game or at a grocery store or at a gym. All of those are assemblies, but the church is a holy assembly of people. And so when I'm looking at this analogy of the marina and the boats and the 100 docks, that is the church deployed for mission. So I think we can have all these questions in the analogy of asking what is the church? What's the marina? What's this? What's that? It helps with clarifying. But I think at the end of the day, all of it is encompassing. God designed individuals to have holistic health. I think that's kind of the beauty of some of these ministries is that Jesus offers the greatest gift of all in salvation, but he also offers a life of abundance with him. And we see him in his ministry heal people and feed people and restore sight. And I think that that's just a place that, how beautiful that someone could enter into the church and also experience both spiritual relief, but physical relief as well.
Yeah. So you asked about the Big C Church.
Yep.
What I think the Big C Church would be is that the whole harbor is filled with marinas. That's the Big C Church. Jesus is the harbor master. He's over all of this. And that's the whole purpose for everything. And all these churches are so missional. But I want to go back to one more thing, because we're talking about the boats in the marina, and we're getting more clarity. There are some churches that they don't have a ministry as a church. They have worship, and they have all the boats that are coming in. And I think where churches miss the mark is that a church of believers, the average church size is 74. What can 74 people do that the individual can't do? See, the individual's going out beyond the breakwater. That's what you hope.
Yeah. Or staying and praying. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So what do you do with now you got 74 people that are gathering together? What can we do together? That's going to determine your boat. And now the church has a boat, a ministry that says, hey, what if we have a food ministry and we charge people a nickel over what we pay for it? Great. Now you get a group of people that are jumping onto that boat and saying, can I be part of that? Out of 74 people, maybe 25 people are in that ministry, and they're putting their heads together and they're planning. And then they're like, let's go. And the purpose is they can do collectively what the individual can't do. And they're able to go out beyond the breakwater. And maybe the other 50 people are staying behind, cheerleading, supporting, ready to receive that person who comes in when the boat comes in and they don't know Christ. And the boat goes out and they're serving and they're working, and then they come in. And then maybe the next week, another 20 people, 20 people come off, 20 people go out. And now different people are going out. So I think that would be wow, this is really cool. This is what our church's ministry is in the community that we get to do together. But I think there's so many churches that they have no ministry. They have no mission. And they might have a boat, and it's idle.
Yeah.
Not doing anything. But they know they should, but they haven't. I think that's where we're coming in to say, how can we help? And And boy, if there's anything that I could just pour into every church leader, listen to these podcasts.
Yeah.
And challenge the church where you're at and start asking the question, what can we do? Because if you don't, boy, I want to go back to a quote that a pastor gave us who came, to see the community ministries, preached a message on Sunday morning and says, I do not want to officiate the funeral of this church. And holy smokes, that got their attention.
Oh, yeah.
But 8 people came out of that. About almost 10% of his church are now meeting regularly, and they're deciding what their boat's going to do. And that's so amazing, Lyndsay.
Yeah.
It doesn't take 100 people. It doesn't take 1,000 people. 8.
Yeah.
And they're going to change their community because 8 people are going to go beyond the breakwater, and they're going to, God willing, get somebody a life jacket who's going to die without Christ if they didn't do it.
Right. And I think what's exciting about that to me is I just in the Bible, it says where 2 or more are gathered, Jesus is there.
Yeah.
And so it's almost okay, sneaky, okay, let's make a plan of attack as a church of because we know that where 2 or more are gathered, God will be with us.
Yes.
And so as you ask the question, what can we do together that the individual cannot do? I'm thinking, let's do everything that we possibly can do because I know that God will be there with us together. Yeah. And so let's just not be sleepy and stagnant and idle, but okay, let's get out there. We're together in this and God is with us. And gosh, we're invincible in the service of God.
I think Jesus is usually the first one on the boat. Who's coming with? We're not going out for him.
Yeah.
We're going out with him, but he's the one saying, come on, come with me. Come follow me. That's what he told his disciples. Come follow me. Beyond the breakwater. I know that's our fill-in, but come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. See, that's what Jesus does. He says to the church, come follow me. I'm going beyond the breakwater. You can do it. I'll help you. You won't drown. What you're thinking of doing might not be the right thing. It's okay. You're not going to drown, but you're going to learn from it. And then you're going to probably wind up doing what I really want you to do.
Yeah, I love it. What can listeners do before they go?
Oh, that question always gets me. I'm never ready for your question when you answer it, and I should.
And
I should know
we do it every single time.
I should know that the question is coming. I think really listen to this and take this to heart. Because when a church loses its mission, what is it? What does it do to the heart of God? Maybe that's what today is just pondering. What does it do to the heart of God when a group of believers have salvation and keep it to themselves? And God could leave that church because they don't need him anymore. They're already saved. He could leave. I would imagine when he walks out of that church, he cries. Because he's like, if only they would catch the vision and go out beyond the breakwater and watch what God is able to do. Because God is able to do more than we can imagine or more than we can think. And I think he cries. And so I would just tell every listener, look at your church. Whether you're pastor, layperson, look at your church and ask yourself, what does God want? Are we doing what God wants us to do?
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater, a podcast of Elevate Community Ministries. Don't let the conversation stop here. You can email us at hello@beyondthebreakwater.org. We would love to chat with you, answer questions, plan a visit, and help you take your next step. We'll see you next week.